Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me this Saturday. I'm Frederica Whitfield. It's been about 4 years in the making, and now the grand opening of the nation's newest civil rights museum. And there, the President of the United States getting a private tour there in Jackson, Mississippi, of the state-funded Museum of Civil Rights there. The president there underscoring in a speech how he was paying solemn tribute to those heroes, Mississippians who are being honored there, among them James Meredith, Medgar Evers, and the list goes on. However, there were many living civil rights foot soldiers who were invited to today's event who did not arrive in attendance. I'm talking about Congressman John Lewis and Benny Thompson, all of them saying that the president's history is not in step with those who risked so much to produce change in Mississippi and beyond. Joining me right now is Paris Denard, a CNN political commentator, and A. Scott Bolden, the former D.C. Democratic chair, both with me now. Good to see you.
Good seeing you.
So, Paris, I want to begin with you because earlier today, even before today's remarks from the president, I heard a young Alabama Republican say this morning that while he supports the office of the president, he did not support Trump. And perhaps you just heard me talk to Congressman Garamendi, who underscored the hypocrisy, in his view, of the president being at the Civil Rights Museum, his remarks, and saying that it was very upsetting for the congressman. So, in your view, do you understand the criticism from so many now in terms of the president's arrival there at the museum and even his remarks?
First of all, I thank you for having me on the program. I commend President Trump for going to Jackson, Mississippi at the invitation of the governor and representing the entire United States of America. People forget he's not just the president of the Republican Party. He's the president of every single American, every American who voted for him, the millions that did, including the 8% African Americans, and the millions that might not have supported him then, may not support him now. It doesn't matter. So, Paris, I don't think anybody's disputing that. But when people talk about his track record that is antithetical to the symbolism and the content of the Civil Rights Museum, that's what they're talking about. So I think you look at this from the standpoint of, in these 12 months that he's been in office, show me where his track record has been anything but supportive of African Americans specifically. I looked at Garamendi's, the congressman who you just had on. I didn't see an overwhelming, beautiful, flowing support of African Americans in the 6.5% that represent his district in Northern California. So the hypocrisy on his side to even have the audacity to talk about President Trump is hypocrisy. How about he, as a sitting congressman, do something for the African American community when it comes to housing, which did nothing during the past 8 years that he was in power with the past administration? Or how about supporting this tax cut that is going to benefit middle-class Americans, especially small businesses, and the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs are African-American women. This tax cut is something that's important. So when you talk about hypocrisy, let's look at what the Congress is doing and what the president is actually doing. Symbolically, Frederica, it is important for him to be there to recognize the efforts of Mississippi so that the whole world right now is Googling who's Paris,
and Scott, perhaps you can underscore, because there are current Justice Department rollbacks that people will speak to under the first 11 months of the president's office, and then you hear critics who go as far back as the 70s and housing discrimination. So, Scott, are you among those who disagree with the appropriateness of the president being at the Civil Rights Museum?
No, I certainly don't believe he should be there. And you watch Paris Denard very, very cleverly pivot. You asked him a question about the president's record on race, and he turned to Garamendi, your guest, who got it just right. I'll give you his record on civil rights and his record on oppressing people, black people and brown people. He supports the Confederate flag. He inconsistently disavows white nationalists. He has a voter suppression commission. He attacks African American women and NFL players. Please don't interrupt me. He does that.
Well, if you're going to lie about the president,
I'm not lying about anything.
Well, hold on, Paris. You'll have a moment.
He wants to build a wall to keep Mexicans out. He wants to ban Muslims. This is reality. This is not some of Donald Trump's rhetoric. And I tell you what, we've had a year of Donald Trump, and he asked black people what they had to lose. What has he done for the urban agenda and African Americans and poor people and brown people and even rural white people to empower them in this country under his leadership? Nothing. He doesn't belong at that museum. And if he did go, what would he say? Would anybody believe him? I think not, because he's got his rhetoric that he reads from, but the reality is he's got an abysmal record on race relations and race discrimination and just being a divider, not a uniter. And that's my response to Paris Denard.
Was it a
nonsense.
missed opportunity that perhaps the president did not make a promise while using the backdrop of the Civil Rights Museum in which to convince his critics that he has the best interest of black and brown people in mind, Paris?
Well, he certainly couldn't do that, but go right ahead.
Well,
go ahead, Paris.
Scott, if you don't want me to interrupt you, don't interrupt me. The important thing is the president was present. Look, after Hurricane Katrina, President George W. Bush had a lot of people coming out against him, but yet and still he went to the groundbreaking of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in November of 2006. It was an important thing for him to do, as he talked about the importance of having that monument, that memorial in Washington, D.C. Fast forward, when President Trump, in his first visit to a Smithsonian museum, it was an African-American museum. And then our
But
first
it's more
lady,
than a backdrop. I think,
visit,
Paris, that's what is being said. It's more than using a backdrop as a great picture opportunity, but there has to be some content that comes with that. So the question was, might this have been a missed opportunity for this president in which to make a promise, convey verbally a commitment that is in sync with the backdrop of this Civil Rights Museum in Mississippi?
I think his presence there and the words that he uttered was an important step for this country to hear about. Not every speech, not every instance is going to be one for him to make a promise to do anything. But the presence there of this president. And there is the president.
These are live pictures right now, by the way. He is departing Jackson, Mississippi. It was a very brief, very quick private tour and remarks being made there at the Civil Rights Museum. But the program there extends. So go ahead.
But Frederica,
these are teachable moments. These are teachable moments for the American people, for all of those people who may have never heard of Medgar Evers, who might not know of the history of Mississippi.
And that is what the museum is about. You go to the visit.
And that is why the president was there to highlight it.
Okay. All right. Go ahead,
Scott.
We're
having this conversation today.
All right, Scott.
Yeah, here's the deal. He couldn't have made that speech and couldn't have dramatized that whatsoever, because just last night he went to Florida and the Alabama border and asked for people to vote for someone like Roy Moore, who believes that America was great at its best during slavery times, and that when families were together, when we know under slavery, white slave owners tore black families apart.
And quickly on that, Paris,
is
that difficult?
So certainly couldn't do that. That's the rhetoric
and Paris, this
today,
is personal.
but the reality from yesterday.
And Paris, this is personal for so many people of color in this nation. So for you personally, then, as you defend the President of the United States, whether it be him be at Mississippi today, how do you, as a black man, defend the president's remarks last night for support of a man who talked about days being great in the days of slavery?
Exactly. He can't.
How do you do that?
So,
Can't.
Scott, that was what's called a pivot. So you don't want to talk about Mississippi. You're going to talk about Alabama.
Let's listen to him try to defend himself as a black man with Donald Trump. Let's hear it.
Pause for a second, because I do want to hear Paris.
Hold your tongue.
Go ahead, Paris. I'd like to hear your response to that.
My culture, my race, my family, and insinuating that my blackness is in question because I support this president. So you can cut that
let's listen to your defense.
Scott,
let's listen to your defense.
There's no defense. Let me be clear.
Exactly.
I will not defend my Scott.
Well, you don't have to defend your blackness right now. That's not what I'm asking,
That's what you just asked me to do. You asked me to defend my blackness as it relates to
I'm asking you to defend how difficult it might be to support someone who is supporting someone who says days were great when it was in slavery. How do you
So if you want to talk about Alabama, let's talk about the fullness of it. The president endorsed Luther Strange. That's who he wanted to be in this position.
But last night he was in Pensacola supporting Roy Moore.
That's another pivot.
Last night, he made a political judgment to say that he'd rather have a Republican from Alabama voting for the tax cut in his agenda that's going to help make this country great, and that includes African Americans, than have the liberal in there who's not going to vote for his agenda.
Is it also asking people to
dismiss in Congress? I'd rather
Is it
have
asking people
somebody
to
in Congress
dismiss
who's
what
going
he
to vote
said about
for
slavery and greatness, also dismiss allegations against him that allege he is a pedophile?
And
Well,
preyed on
Is the president
13-year-old
asking
girls.
to dismiss those things?
You know what? I'm interested in trying to figure out where everyone was when all of the things that, when President Obama went down and spoke at Robert KKK Byrd, as people used to call him,
can we
his
just
funeral,
keep it to
and the
answering
things
that question?
He can't answer it. He can't defend the indefensible, Frederica. Come to me. Let me comment.
This is not indefensible. No,
It is
Scott,
completely
you just keep
indefensible.
interrupting. But this is what it is at the end of the day. The president was endorsing Roy Moore for his vote at being a vote for the American agenda that he is trying to promote. And that agenda, in my opinion, is going to benefit the African American community. If we went back and looked at every single thing that every Democrat has said, as every liberal has said that has been negative against this black community or our culture, you would find many of those remarks offensive. But what President Trump did last night was say, I would like to have this Republican voting for my agenda to make this country great. And this is an individual whom he did not support in the beginning. It was Luther Strange. But back to Mississippi, which is why we're here today. It's an important moment for the country. It's important for the president to be there, and he should show up every single time, because if he didn't, Scott Bowl will be screaming to the top of his lungs that the president
And I'm only saying because we're up against a hard break, but not because this is the end of the discussion, because I really do want to hear more from both of you on this, because this is passionate. This is the kind of conversation that's happening right now at just about every dinner table and in every office in America right now. And it is a conversation that cannot end right here.
And Trump's agenda. He just said that. Unbelievable. It's not my agenda, and it's not safe for black people and brown people in this country.
All right.
It is safe.
I'm going to have to leave it right there. I'm so sorry, because the satellite is going to cut you both off. Paris Denard and Scott Bolden, thank you so much. We're going to have you back because we have to talk about this some more. We'll be right back.